Chapter 81 The Fierce Guan Yu and the Determined Ze. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Grippler shook his head. I offered you a way out and you've rejected my kindness. You too seem to mistake my kindness for weakness, but let me tell you. Those who don't comply can all just die. Grippler lifted his hand in the air, giving the signal for his companions or rather underlings to begin their assault. Out of the 10 players surrounding Guan Yu and Ze, 6 of them rushed over. 3 of them were fighter classes and the other 3 were rogue classes. Out of the 4 players who stayed back and did not charge forward were 1 ranger, 2 mages, and 1 shaman. Kindness. Laughable. Guan Yu swung his guandao outward in a horizontal arc with a mighty force, causing the players who rushed towards him and Ze to fly backward. In that case, allow me to repay your kindness with gratitude. Name. Guan Yu level. 23 class. Spear Enforcer, TCH. The second tier classes really are much more powerful than the first tier classes. When Grippler saw the 6 players who charged forward get knocked back with such ease, his facial expression grew a bit more serious. However, it's still 10 of them up against just 2 players. When players reached level 20 in RML they were able to upgrade their class to one of its various second tiers. For example, Guan Yu originally started the game with the warrior class, but after reaching level 20 he upgraded his warrior class to one of its second tier options, the Spear Enforcer. There were numerous different directions a player could take their character when it came to second tier upgrades, however, all the upgrades had one thing in common. They gave players a massive boost in overall combat ability compared to a first tier class like warrior or rogue. The Spear Enforcer class was a plate wearing damage class that could also double as a tank if the situation required it. Of course, they could not compare to a pure tank class when it came to taking punishment, but Spear Enforcers were definitely capable of holding their own ground. If a player wanted to upgrade their class, they were required to complete a class quest depending on what class they would like to upgrade to. Some were much more challenging than others but the payoff was often worth it. The only exception to the class upgrades was the Combat Master class. Combat Masters were not capable of upgrading to a second tier class due to the unique nature of their class. Then again, this was just something recorded by players who never really went in depth when it came to that class. If you want to live, then protect me. Although Ze believed Guan Yu to be a little simple-minded, she had to admit that his strength was not at all weak. Alright. But I'm only protecting you because it's what a man should do. Guan Yu took a defensive stance and remained vigilant of the 6 individuals who were knocked back. They had regained their footing and was now looking for a proper opening to attack. Ze released the arrow that was resting on the bowstring and aimed right for the shaman that was now positioned at the back of the group for their own protection. Shamans were a healing class and since it was already 10 versus 2, not including Grippler, having to deal with a shaman would just make things more stressful. Block it. The shaman could see the arrow heading his way. He was not used to fighting against other players and had just recently joined this group. So to suddenly be picked out as a target caused him to panic. Heh, you think such a simple arrow can go through my defenses? Keep dreaming. Grippler finally took action and stepped in front of the flight path of the arrow that was aimed at the shaman. The arrow was moving incredibly slow compared to the way normal arrows soared through the air. Grippler held his shield up to intercept the arrow, however, just when the arrow was about to touch his shield, it accelerated and vanished into thin air. Wah! Grippler was shocked by the arrow's sudden acceleration and thought that he was in trouble, but the arrow just disappeared into nothingness. Could it be that the attack was so weak that it still was unable to penetrate through his defenses? Heh, you almost scared me th. Just as Grippler spoke, he heard a loud scream coming from behind him. Gah! The shaman surprisingly had an arrow pierced right through his chest where his heart was located. There was a look of disbelief on his face. How could the arrow reach him? Didn't Grippler block it? How? Grippler also had a look of disbelief on his face. He assumed that he had already seen every skill that the both of them had to offer. However, this was not a skill he witnessed ZE use before. Humph, I'm not done. ZE swiftly materialized another 3 arrows and shot them off in random directions. The strange thing was that these arrows were not targeting anything in particular. It really appeared as though ZE was just shooting randomly and wasting arrows. However, just like before, after a certain period of time, the arrows vanished into thin air. Name: ZE level 22 class. Void Seeker. Isroth was watching the battle below unfold and was quite impressed by the way those two handled the situation. The thing that caught Isroth's attention the most were the arrows being shot out by that ranger down below. Those arrows would be quite tricky to deal with, even with my heightened senses. However, after the first 2 shots, the pattern becomes a bit predictable, so I would not have any issues. But if they were capable of creating a more complex attack pattern then. This was Isroth's first time seeing other players fighting against one another. He observed the fight closely in order to receive a better understanding of the combat capabilities of players at the moment. Well, they may not have much of a problem 11 versus 2, but it seems that the other side came fully prepared. Isroth swept his gaze over the area surrounding the location of the main fight. He could sense multiple other presences hiding away within the forest. The true fight had yet to even begin. Isroth leaped from off of the tree branch with a carefree expression in his face. Grippler's group had no way of defending against ZE's assault. Every time someone would attempt to block or evade the incoming arrow, it would disappear, and then, before they knew it, the arrow would be sticking out of their character. How were they supposed to defend against something like that? The 6 melee players tried to launch a pincer attack, but even with the rogues hiding in stealth mode, Guan Yu managed to react in time and kept to his promise of defending ZE. The 2 of them together was like a small 2-person army. The shaman had already met his demise under ZE's deadly accurate assault, and she had just released another arrow that reaped the life of one of the other mages. ZE already eliminated 2 players and not a single scratch had befallen her or Guan Yu. Enough. Obviously, you two don't know when to give up, so let me make things easier for you. Grippler whistled loudly. Guan Yu furrowed his brows as a serious expression found itself upon his face. 11 versus 2 isn't enough, so you have to call for backup. Can you be any more shameless? ZE's facial expression darkened when she saw the players stepping out of their hiding spots nearby. Now, there was a total of 20 players. No matter how strong the 2 of them were, being up against numbers like this, it would be difficult to come out on top. You two should feel honored. Normally, a force of this size isn't mobilized. However, you two have something quite valuable and we just happen to want it. You can curse your own good fortune. Grippler had to practically beg his guild leader for command of these players. He had already lost 2 of them due to his carelessness, and so he had to make sure that the rewards were well worth it. Guan Yu and ZE both were in possession of some rare pieces of equipment. If they managed to obtain at least one rare piece of equipment from both of them, then he could ignore the 2 deaths and just reimburse them. However, if he returned empty-handed, then his guild leader would not forgive him so easily. After all, his guild leader was a ruthless individual. You should run, I'll try to create an opening for you. There's no reason that both of us should die here. Guan Yu spoke under his breath so that only ZE could hear him. Humph, since when can you tell me what to do? If I want to stay and fight, then I'll stay and fight. ZE was determined to stand her ground rather than run away with her tail tucked between her legs. ZE was many things, but she refused to be a coward. Well said. Guan Yu brandished his guandao and took an offensive stance. There was no point in trying to defend against this many players at the same time. I'll have to go all out, so I won't be able to protect you. Think you'll be alright? These guys are just all bark and no bite. I'll survive. A small gust of wind formed beneath Ziyi's feet. Then, I'll be going. Guan Yu's right foot put so much pressure onto the earth beneath it that he left a deep footprint within the ground as he pushed off and charged forward at an incredible speed. This speed was not something that should belong to someone wearing plated armor. How fast? Ziyi was a bit startled by how quick Guan Yu moved for his class type. But, she would not allow herself to be shown up. The wind beneath her feet shot her into the air, causing her to leap in an arc above the nearest group of players. Ziyi released a single arrow from her bow, but the single arrow split into two and the two split into four. The arrows kept multiplying until there was a total of 60.4 and they rained down upon the group of enemy players. Guan Yu was heading towards the group's back line, but the original 6 melee players blocked his path. Out of the way. A light blue aura encompassed Guan Yu's Guandao as it swept outward in the direction of the 6 players. However, the Guandao was not anywhere near close enough to hit them. Heh, what are you swinging eh? Just as one of the 6 melee players was about to taunt Guan Yu, he felt an overwhelming force crash into his body and sending him tumbling backward. Whoosh! Soon after, the other 5 melee players followed in his footsteps as they were all swept clear of Guan Yu's path with a single swing of his Guandao. A fierce fight broke out as Guan Yu and Ziyi were each holding their own against the wave of enemies. However, the harder they fought the more fatigued they felt themselves becoming. It was not natural fatigue but one that seemed to be induced by an outside source. What's going on? Why am I getting tired so fast? Guan Yu asked himself as his breathing became erratic and unsteady. Usually, he was able to fight for extended periods of time without feeling fatigue, but he had only been fighting for a few minutes and was already so tired. Ziyi was in even worse shape than Guan Yu. She was having trouble with a simple action such as lifting her longbow. Her accuracy had also considerably worsened and she missed shots that she should have been able to hit with her eyes closed. Grippler had an evil grin on his face as he watched Guan Yu and Ziyi battle it out against his guild members. Keep struggling, the more you struggle the more your demise is inevitable. He muttered to himself. Chapter 82 Should I assist you? No need. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Guan Yu and Ziyi continued to fight without backing down, however, the fatigue was slowly becoming too much for them to handle. In total, they managed to eliminate 13 players. This included the 2 players Ziyi defeated before the other group revealed themselves. But the cost was great as both Guan Yu and Ziyi were barely holding on at this point. Hey! C. Can you still fight? Ziyi's voice was trembling as she spoke. It was difficult for her to even speak at the moment. She had no idea what was going on as she had gone hours straight battling without a single sign of fatigue. This was something completely unfamiliar to her. Ziyi felt an abundance of gratitude towards Guan Yu. Even though the two of them had never met one another before today, he still guarded her during many occasions when the fatigue started to severely affect her. Of course. Guan Yu stood straight up and stabbed his Guandao into the ground before him. His voice may have sounded reassuring, but one could tell that he had already reached his limit. In fact, if he tried to move he may not even be able to maintain his balance properly. There was now a total of 8 players remaining, including Grippler, and they were all surrounding Guan Yu and Ziyi. Grippler had an incredibly ugly expression on his face. These two had been more trouble than he originally believed them to be. 13 players were killed by 2 players alone. This was an embarrassment, and even if he did succeed, his guild leader would question his ability to carry out a job efficiently. He had to try and capitalize on Guan Yu and Ziyi's helplessness and reap more benefits. It's over. However, I'm still willing to show some compassion. After all, I am not completely heartless. I will forgive you, under one condition, that is. Grippler spoke in a very magnanimous tone of voice. Compassion. Forgive us. Why do we need your forgiveness? How about I offer you a deal? Think of it as my way of showing you compassion. Kowtow and beg for our forgiveness and you may still escape in one piece. Guan Yu did not hesitate to speak out. He was sick of dealing with such a deceitful person. When Grippler heard the words that left Guan Yu's mouth, he almost lost control and erupted in anger. However, he was able to maintain his calm and in control demeanor. Suit yourself then. Does he answer for you as well? Grippler looked over toward Ze. He felt as if she would be more sensible. Ze stared coldly at Grippler. She would not bother wasting her words on such an insignificant person any longer. Ze tilted her nose up at Grippler to show that she looked down on him. She had an icy cold look in her eyes and it felt as though she were looking at a small speck of dust. Even though she had trouble making the slightest movement, she wanted Grippler to know that he wasn't even in her sights. That small gesture made Grippler lose his composure. If there was one thing he couldn't stand, it was being looked down upon. Good. Very good. I haven't been this angry in a long time. It's been a while since someone has dared to look down on me. Grippler was no longer using that magnanimous tone of voice from earlier. Now, his voice was filled with unbridled rage. Don't think that after I kill you this once that everything will be over. Every time you leave the city, we'll be waiting. You'll die over and over again until I'm convinced that you've learned your lesson. I've had enough of trying to talk sense into you two fools. Grippler raised his hand and gave the order to finish them. Guan Yu and Ze both had darkened expressions on their faces. However, neither of them could even lift a muscle to defend themselves. It was over. They could only wait for the inevitable now, their deaths. Ah! Just when the group was getting ready to begin their assault, they heard a loud scream sound out from nearby. Everyone seemed surprised when they heard that scream, except for Grippler. His face turned extremely pale. Everyone turned to look in the direction of the scream and saw that a hooded player was lying dead on the ground around 20 meters away. There was apparently another player hiding nearby that had yet to reveal himself. However, everyone present appeared to be startled by the sudden scream. Everyone except for Grippler, who looked as if he'd seen a ghost. Impossible. How? Grippler sounded flustered and panicked. The person who just died was a second-tier class holder in their guild. He personally begged his guild leader for their assistance because of the unique nature of their class. Them dying was definitely not a part of the deal. The hooded person who was lying on the ground eliminated possessed the second-tier class known as Curse Ghost. Their main specialties were ideal for player versus player combat, however, they were not very useful in fighting against monsters outside of boss fights. The Curse Ghost class was an upgrade option from the Mage class. Their main focus was bombarding the enemy with multiple curses until they were rendered useless. The only problem was that curses usually took quite a bit before the effects are felt by the player infected by them. It was even more so for low-level curses, which was why it took some time before the full effects began to show for Guan Yu and Ze. This class was more of a support than anything, and if used correctly, could be a huge deciding factor in a battle. One of the scariest things about the Curse Ghost class was that unlike most classes that showed when their skills inflicted a status effect upon its intended target, the Curse Ghost class did not. That meant whenever a player was inflicted with a curse, they would be completely unaware of it until it was too late. Out of the bushes, just a few steps beside the hooded individual was a young man with a sword in his hand. This sword had bits of electricity jumping around it and emitted a faint thunderous sound. That young man was Isroth. Isroth had a calm and carefree expression on his face as he stepped out of the bushes and returned his blade of lightning to its sheath. I did not originally plan on interfering, however. It was becoming a bit boring watching this guy sit back and make things uninteresting. Isroth looked down at the body of the player he just killed. Although he was well hidden, he could still not escape Isroth's perception. Isroth then turned his attention over to Guan Yu, Ze, Grippler, and the remaining players. Do you know what you've just done? Grippler had an extremely gloomy look on his face. He knew that even if he was successful in eliminating those two, he would still have to answer for the death of Dr. Dark, the player who just died. When Dr. Dark died, Guan Yu and Ze felt as if an incredible burden had been lifted off of their shoulders. The fatigue disappeared at a rapid pace and they felt as though they had been given a second wind. This was due to one of the downsides of the Curse Ghost class. When the caster of the curse died, then all of their curses would vanish along with them. So when Dr. Dark died, the curses naturally removed itself from Guan Yu and Ze. However, neither of them were in a good state, having taken a pretty decent amount of damage while they were incapacitated. A friend of yours. Guan Yu was once again full of energy, despite the heavy amount of damage he had received. Guan Yu saw that Grippler seemed to be infuriated by the death of that hooded player, and so he assumed that whoever that mysterious player who appeared had to be on their side. Ze shook her head. I was about to ask you the same question. They may have unsettled business with one another. Either way, it seems that we owe him. Ze then glanced over at the hooded figure lying on the ground by Isrotha's feet. That player on the ground over there was most likely the cause of our fatigue. It disappeared as soon as they died. Ze pieced things together quickly. After all, it did not take a genius to connect the two. Guan Yu was surprised. He thought it was because of a miraculous second wind that had overcome them, not because of the death of a player that was hiding away. Even with so many players, they still had to stoop to such low methods. How sickening. Guan Yu was usually a very understanding and forgiving individual, but these players had gone too far past his bottom line. Isroth ignored Grippler and set his gaze upon Guan Yu and Ze. Should I assist you? Grippler was furious at being ignored by a total stranger. It seemed to him as if everyone was out to make his life more difficult today. No need. Guan Yu and Ze shouted in unison. The two of them were determined to finish this fight alone. After all, how could they shamelessly ask for help from a stranger when he had already helped them more than enough? Isroth smiled ever so slightly. He inwardly nodded his head in approval. If they asked for help, he would have given it to them, however, his good opinion of them would have drastically decreased. He also would have felt that it was not worth helping them to begin with. But, their answer left him intrigued. Guan Yu and Ze unleashed a fierce and relentless assault against the remaining players. Grippler did not have time to deal with Isroth and had to assist his underlings in their fight. However, they could not handle the combined attacks of Guan Yu and Ze. A few moments later, the only player from the opposing side left standing was the tank, Grippler. He had a maddened facial expression and a look of hatred had taken root deep within his eyes. You all have no idea who you've just offended. My headhunter syndicate will not let you off. You will have nowhere to hide in all of RML. Grippler roared at the top of his lungs. And you? Grippler looked over towards Isroth. You have committed the largest offense. Don't dream of KSSSHT. Grippler looked down at his chest and saw that a bladed object was sticking out of it. His eyes widened from shock and soon after, he collapsed onto the ground. He had died from that final strike. Guan Yu pulled his guandao out of Grippler's chest and spun it a few times before placing it upon his back. Humph, Headhunter Syndicate. Never heard of them. He did not fear this Headhunter Syndicate. Even if it was a top guild like Crosshaven or Blue Oasis, he wouldn't care. He refused to sit back and be bullied by anyone. Ze had her eyes closed and her arms folded as she let out a long sigh of relief. Honestly, that fight had exhausted her. Unlike Guan Yu, she was not a plate-wearing character and so her defensive skills were incredibly lacking. If she made one false move she could have easily died while under the effects of that fatigue. Guan Yu and Ze both glanced at each other before looking over towards that mysterious player who aided them earlier. Although he only eliminated a single player, it was enough to change the entire flow of events. If not for him, then they may very well have been killed by Grippler and his group. Guan Yu was the first to approach Isroth, and he immediately cupped his fist and gave a slight bow. You have saved both of us from a disgraceful ending. You have our thanks. He was very sincere in his thanks and did not mind showing a proper level of respect to someone who helped him. Ze also gave a slight nod. It was her way of saying thank you. Though it was something she was not used to doing. To most people, it may come off as unappreciative or arrogant. However, Isroth could tell from her body language that neither of those was the case. Isroth slightly nodded in response. I only happened to be passing by, and gave a small helping hand. May I know the name of our benefactor? Guan Yu stood up straight and got a closer look at Isroth. He could not tell what class Isroth was, no matter how hard he tried. He was also unable to make any rough estimates when it came to his strength. However, Guan Yu had a gut feeling. He could tell that the mysterious man before him was not an individual to be taken lightly, even with such a carefree expression. Isroth. Isroth kept his response short and simple. I see, Isroth. A noble name indeed. Guan Yu nodded his head. I am Guan Yu. He then pointed towards Ze, and she is known as. Guan Yu paused. When Isroth noticed that Guan Yu paused, he figured something must have been wrong. Ze, on the other hand, had a cold look on her face. What was your name again? Guan Yu rubbed the back of his head as he gave a small awkward laugh. Isroth stared blankly at Guan Yu. There was only one thought that went through Isroth's head at that moment. I have a feeling him and Hulls would get along just fine. Chapter 83 Headhunter Syndicate. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Fools. All of you, fools. You had one simple task. There were more than 20 of you and you still couldn't handle 2 players. Useless trash. Somewhere in a remote region inside of a small yet spacious building within the capital city Amaharp, Grippler and the group of players who died just moments ago were all standing before a man who was shouting furiously at them. Boss Wend. When we're here in RML you'll refer to me as Vault. How many times do I have to tell you? Vault, the one who Grippler called boss, lashed out at him. Yes, of course. Forgive me Boss Vault. Grippler quickly apologized for his mistake. Boss Vault. You see, another person interfered and. Grippler was getting ready to explain the situation, but when he saw that cold piercing gaze from his boss, he immediately shut his mouth. So what if another person joined? You couldn't handle 3 people. I see I was the foolish one for providing you with my trust. The one who Grippler referred to as Boss Vault was the guild leader of the Headhunter Syndicate. The Headhunter Syndicate was a new and upcoming guild in RML. However, for a new guild, their size is incredible and they are continuing to grow every day. Even the top guilds are keeping an eye on them as they believe it to be inevitable that someday soon, the Headhunter Syndicate join the top ranks. At the moment, rare pieces of equipment were still incredibly difficult to come by. Most players would not sell them at the auction house, and if they did, the top guilds would always be the ones to walk away with the item. Unfortunately, the Headhunter Syndicate did not yet have resources comparable to those top guilds. Therefore, in order to rapidly increase the overall strength of his guild, Vault was willing to resort to these underhanded tactics. He would do whatever it took to join the ranks of the top guilds. When Dr. Dark died, he was furious at having lost valuable EXP. He even dropped an item after his death. He immediately approached Vault about his compensation. After all, he was guaranteed protection and they had failed to provide it. It was only right that he be compensated for his troubles. When Dr. Dark explained the entire situation to Vault, his face turned extremely ugly. At first, there was regret and then there was just endlessly fury. Since Grippler had begged him, Vault decided to give him a chance due to the potential profit that could be made from that transaction. However, not only did they not manage to bring back a single item, they even got annihilated by 3 players. After yelling and scolding Grippler, as well as the players who accompanied him, Vault finally managed to somewhat calm down. He then turned to look over in Dr. Dark's direction. "Dr. Dark, I'll fully reimburse you for your troubles. As for that player who killed you, you'll have your justice. Do you have a name?" To Vault, Dr. Dark was an important core member of his headhunter syndicate. He was one of the main players who had an abundance of experience as a pro player in multiple MMORPGs and had already completed his second tier class quest. He was an essential piece to Vault's core group. Dr. Dark shook his head. "I died before I could even see him, so his name isn't even in my battle logs. However, he is definitely related to those 2 who were the original targets. If we find them, we'll find him. I simply want the chance to eliminate him as he did me." Dr. Dark had a vicious look in his eyes. In RML, if a player killed someone before they were discovered or seen, then their name would not show up in the battle logs. However, if even one person in the party was able to view the player, then their name would show up without issue. The problem was that Dr. Dark was not in a party with any of the members who saw Isroth after he stepped out into the open. He was solo, and so, therefore, the system defined Isroth's attack as one performed by an unknown enemy. This was a feature in RML that those who picked assassin-type classes enjoyed. Vault nodded. "I agree. If we let people think that the Headhunter Syndicate can be offended so easily without retaliation, then how can we become a top guild? We will, of course, find that player who attacked you and his 2 friends. There'll be no safe place for them to hide within all of RML. As for you..." Vault stared coldly at Grippler, which sent shivers down his spine. "The one thing I hate the most is having lost something without gaining anything in return. I'm lowering your rank to that of a regular member." When Grippler heard those words, his face turned pale. He had worked hard to earn his current position, and now he was being kicked down all the way to a mere regular member. However, he was unable to make an objection as this could already be considered a light punishment. "Yes, Boss Vault." Grippler felt incredibly dejected. This was supposed to be an easy job, but it was all ruined by that one player. When Grippler thought back to that moment and how carefree that player appeared to be, rage and hatred slowly started to form. "However, I'm not a merciless person. You can redeem yourself and have your old position back after you keep good on your original promise. This time, however, you'll have to rely on yourself and your own resources to complete the task." Vault spoke in a cold tone of voice. "I also want you to find out the name of that 3rd player and any information regarding him, since you know what he looks like. He interfered in our guild's affairs and has to be taught a proper lesson. Otherwise, he'll think we're just a bunch of pushovers." When Vault gave those orders, Grippler regained some hope of once again obtaining his previous position. He already wanted revenge against that player who interfered, and so this would be like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. "Yes, Boss Vault. I won't let you down." Grippler gave a deep bow. Grippler understood that he would have to invest his own time and resources into this. Although Vault stated that he was not a merciless person, he was sending Grippler to face off against 3 people. 2 of which he knew could battle against 20 players at the same time and come out victorious. However, Grippler had certain connections that he could use and some favors he was able to call upon. No matter what, he was determined to regain the face he recently lost. "Humph, you better not let me down. I can be forgiving once, but if you fail twice, I can't guarantee my kindness will extend that far." Vault was not making an empty promise. If Grippler failed again, forget about a rank reduction, he would be completely finished. Vault glanced behind himself. There were 2 players standing there, but both were hiding within the shadows, so it would be difficult to detect them. Put out a message to all the Headhunter Syndicate members. Be on the lookout for 2 players called Guan Yu and Ze. As for that 3rd player, Find out anything you can about him. Although Vault gave Grippler a chance to find out more information, he did not trust Grippler's competence in the matter. But, it was always good to have a backup plan. One of the two individuals that were hiding in the shadows spoke in a hoarse voice, "What should we do if we find them during our investigation?" Vault thought for a moment before soon coming up with an answer. "I want you to report back to me and do not engage them. They've already been underestimated once. I do not plan on repeating the mistake of an underling. Once we've learned enough about them, only then will we take action." The two players hiding in the shadows gave a slight nod as they vanished after Vault finished giving his orders. Vault had already done all he could and now must wait for the results. Offending my headhunter syndicate. Let's see who dares to do so in the future. Ahahaha. I knew your name seemed familiar. It's because I've already seen it twice before. So you're that Isroth, ahahaha. Guan Yu behaved in quite a lively manner. He was trying to figure out where he'd seen Isroth's name before, and surprisingly, Ze was the one who pointed out where she had seen the name. Isroth only gave a slight smile in return. He personally did not believe it to be that big of a deal. He had much greater things planned, and those two matters would only provide some kind of small foundation. When Ze spoke about the first world boss clear and the solo dungeon clear, Guan Yu remembered the two events. It made his impression of Isroth go up by another level when he was reminded of those facts. Isroth, Guan Yu, and Ze were currently traveling towards the capital city Amaharp. Guan Yu was very insistent on Isroth accompanying them, and since Isroth was already heading that way, he had no reason to refuse his offer. The most talkative of the three was Guan Yu. He had many questions and would often go on a rant about the romance of the three kingdoms and spew random quotes. Ze, however, was quite the opposite. She was very reserved when it came to having a conversation. But, she was not afraid of giving input on a certain matter or correcting any inaccuracies about something that Guan Yu stated. Guan Yu looked as if he were about to speak, however, he was hesitant to do so. It was quite strange considering how open he was when it came to speaking with complete strangers who he had only just recently met. Isroth noticed Guan Yu's hesitation and decided to free him of his worries. "If you have something to say, then you can just say it." Isroth did not feel that Guan Yu had any ill intentions, and so he knew that whatever it was that Guan Yu wanted to say was most likely something personal. Guan Yu was a bit surprised when Isroth spoke. He did not think that he was showing his thoughts so clearly and felt a bit embarrassed by it. "Well, you see, it's kind of a personal question. Some people would rather not say. It's a bit of a private matter." "Oh." Isroth was curious as to what question would make someone as open, sociable, and long-winded as Guan Yu become embarrassed. Ze's ears perked up slightly as she listened to Guan Yu's words. She was also interested in what he had to say. From the short time she had known Guan Yu, she could say that he was definitely not someone you would ever associate with the word shy. "Your. What's your class? I have not yet seen a setup such as yours. I'm just curious." Guan Yu had been unable to find even the slightest hint as to what Isroth's class could possibly be. That was because Isroth's equipment did not fit with any class that he was aware of. Guan Yu felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off of his shoulders after asking that question. Ze almost coughed up blood when she heard Guan Yu speak. She thought it was going to be something extremely serious, but it turned out that he was just curious about Isroth's class. How could someone who was being so fierce just a few moments ago, behave in such a coy fashion? Ze felt foolish for even entertaining the possibility that he was going to ask something serious. Isroth was also caught off guard by the simple nature of the question. He shook his head inwardly. He did not care about revealing what his class was. After all, he had no reason to keep it a secret. "My class is Combat Master." When Isroth finished his sentence, both Guan Yu and Ze had shock clearly written all over their faces. Combat Master. Wasn't that a trash class that no one would dare to pick? But, that did not make any sense when they pieced together the facts, or rather when ZE pierced together the facts. At least at first it did not make any sense. I see now. ZE muttered to herself. When the realization of what type of person Isroth truly was struck her, she had to admit that the thought was pretty scary. She understood that combat masters were required to create their own skills. Even if someone tried to brush Isroth's first world boss clear off as a fluke, it was undeniable that he was capable of soloing a dungeon. Even if the dungeon was a lower-level dungeon, it was still considered an impressive feat. It was certainly not something that the average player could imitate. Guan Yu, on the other hand, did not piece together things like ZE. He was just surprised that Isroth was a combat master. But, that did not mean he would no longer show respect towards Isroth. In fact, Guan Yu had even more respect for Isroth now that he knew what his class was. Daring to play the difficult combat master class was something even he would not dare to attempt. If someone tried and failed, they would lose a lot of precious time and eventually fall too far behind other players. From Isroth's demeanor alone, Guan Yu could tell that he was a strong player. A strong player that showed no arrogance and was always calm on the surface. Those were the scariest type of people to deal with in Guan Yu's opinion because you could never tell what it was that they were truly thinking. Around 20 minutes later, Isroth, Guan Yu, and ZE finally reached the gates of Amaharp. However, there was something unexpected that awaited them upon their arrival. Whoa, talk about an upgrade in security. They look strong. Heh, I'd like to fight against one if possible. Guan Yu was getting all fired up. ZE shook her head. It's unlikely that you would survive even one strike against that. She could tell that those select individuals were the elite of elite soldiers. It appears as if something big is going to happen soon. ZE made an educated guess after examining the Amaharp city gates. Isroth narrowed his eyes as he observed the scene before him. He was sure that this had something to do with Amaharp's impending disaster. Chapter 80 For the Calm Before the Storm Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The NPCs who were previously standing guard and making rounds by the gates of Amaharp were no longer present. Instead, these new guards made the prior ones seem insignificant by comparison. They wore bright red plated armor and their faces were all covered by a helmet in the shape of a dragon's head. Each of the guards wielded a mighty halberd that was constantly exuding a heavy aura near its surroundings. They were all extremely disciplined and the aura each guard personally released was astonishing, to say the least. There was the head of a dragon carved onto their left chest plate. Even from far away, players were able to identify the new NPCs guarding Amaharp. NPC name: Crimson Core Guard, Elite, BL.net NPC level. There were many players lingering outside of the gates entering into Amaharp just to observe the new guards placed there. The players were speaking to one another and speculating as to why new guards had appeared at the gates of Amaharp. Those guards look so powerful. I wonder if it's possible to get their gear from a special quest. Bah! You! Getting that kind of high-level armor. Keep dreaming. We're still a long way away from getting to that level. I'm already level 17 and I still can't see what level those guards are. Plus, that gear is definitely at least rare quality. Maybe there's some kind of event starting soon. One of the players shook their head in response. I haven't seen anything announced on the forums or the official events page that said anything about an event in Amaharp. Still. That doesn't mean it can't be one, right? Not all the events are announced. But it is strange that the guards just changed out of nowhere. As players continued to chat away on the topic of the new guards, Isroth, Guan Yu, and ZE headed towards the gates to enter into the capital city. Crimson Core Guard. I've seen the insignia of the dragon on their armor somewhere before. If I recall correctly, there are no more than 100 Crimson Core Guards. All of them endure torturous training and very few even qualify to attempt the test to become a Crimson Core Guard. ZE was explaining her current knowledge about the new NPCs. How do you know about that kind of stuff? I've never even heard of or seen any Crimson Corps guards before this. Guan Yu was curious as to how Ze came across this information. He had been all around Amaharp and had not come across anything remotely related to them. Isroth was also interested as to how Ze had access to such information. Humph, it's not luck. It's due to the simple fact that I actually read. As long as you pay a fee, you can have direct access to Amaharp's library. There's a lot of information accessible there and even some hidden secrets. Of course, all the real knowledge lies in the palace library. Sadly, there's no way to enter the palace library. At least, not that I know of. How lucky that you managed to come by such information. But it's really impressive that you find the time to read and still keep your level up. Guan Yu said. Ze was currently level 22 and he was level 23. Their current levels were higher than that of the average player. Even some of those who had been playing since RML first officially launched. The further into RML players ventured, the more defined and apparent the defined skill gaps between players became. It isn't luck. I have an eidetic memory. Reading a few books isn't too difficult. Ze corrected Guan Yu's mistaken choice of words. Though, Ze was being quite modest when she said a few books. In fact, she had gone over hundreds of books in Amaharp's library in a very short period of time. An eidetic memory. What's that? Guan Yu asked curiously. Not eidetic. Eidetic memory. It means that I'm able to easily retain and recall information that I've come across in much greater detail than the average person. Ze let out a small sigh. She felt as if Guan Yu was purposely agitating her at times. That's so cool. It's almost like a real-life superpower. I've always wanted photographic memory. Guan Yu was a bit envious of Ze. Ze shook her head, not photographic memory. That sort of thing doesn't really exist. It's difficult to explain, but it's definitely not like looking back at a clear picture that I've taken mentally. I see. Well, it's still a cool ability. Ahahaha. Guan Yu gave a cheerful thumbs up. Isroth, however, knew that photographic memory was actually a real thing. After all, he himself possessed it. But, Ze words were not entirely incorrect. Isroth was capable of cultivating, which allowed his mind to work differently from that of a normal mortal mind. For a normal mortal, possessing a true photographic memory was impossible. But for a cultivator, it was as easy as breathing and drinking water. The ability came to cultivators naturally. Is there anything else you can tell us about the Crimson Corps Guard? Isroth wanted to gather some additional information if possible, as it may relate to the world quest that he had acquired. Or, it may even have something to do with the quest that Terminus entrusted to him back when he first arrived in Amaharp. Ze was surprised when Isroth asked her a question. He did not speak much ever since the moment he had appeared before them. She could usually read people with ease and get a decent understanding of their character. However, she had no idea how to define Isroth, which troubled her for some reason. She did not leave her thoughts idling for too long and replied to Isroth. I don't know much else about them. But I can tell you that only 1 out of 10,000 people can become a Crimson Corps guard. So that's to say out of 1 million people, only 100 was chosen in the end. Also, outside of an emergency or a potential city-wide disaster, they almost never take action. Ze added. Isroth nodded his head to show his thanks. Just with those few facts alone, Isroth somewhat grasped the gravity of the whole situation. If he was 99% sure before that this had something to do with the impending disaster coming towards Amaharp, then now he was 100% sure. I still have an ample amount time remaining for the world quest, the beginning of beginnings. Therefore, this all most likely has something to do with the quest I received from Terminus. Though the question still remains, how much time is left? Isroth understood that quests provided by the system were not always absolute. Changes could occur at any given moment, similar to what happened when Isroth was within the Dungeon Goblin's paradise. Not to mention that this was a world quest. Anything could happen in Isroth's opinion. Isroth, Guan Yu, and Ze entered through the gates of Amaharp without being stopped by the new guards. When they arrived inside of Amaharp, they noticed that there were more soldiers making rounds than usual. Guan Yu cupped his fist towards Isroth. I have some matters to attend to, so I must regretfully take my leave. Guan Yu wished that the journey could last a little longer, but there was something that he absolutely had to take care of. I'll have to ask that you allow me to repay you. While I may not be skilled in many areas, I'm still confident in combat abilities. Therefore, if you ever need assistance, I'll come charging over to repay the favor. Guan Yu had a rare serious expression on his face. Isroth nodded his head in response. He would not decline Guan Yu's offer when there were no losses to be had after accepting it. I don't like owing people. Ze had been waiting for the right moment to bring up the subject. Therefore, if you deem my assistance as a necessary requirement in the completion of a challenging task, I shall offer my aid. Ze did not mince her words. Although she spoke in a very roundabout way, Ze was saying the same thing as Guan Yu. That she would repay Isroth's favor. Actually, there is something that you may be able to assist me with. Isroth surprisingly had a request to make right away. Oh. Ze was curious as to what Isroth had in mind. Somewhere located within the main palace area of Amaharp. Sir, he has returned to the city. Should I personally escort him to the palace? The individual who just spoke was being extremely courteous to the old man before him. It was a Crimson Corps guard, someone with an incredibly high status that was acting so respectful. Lying down on a couch in a lazy manner, while constantly drinking out of a flask, was the old man Isroth had met back in Amaharp. The combat master class teacher, Gear. Gear let out a long yawn as he said, Sure, escort him here to this location. Gear waved his hand to chase away the Crimson Corps guard. Sir. The Crimson Corps guard bowed before he turned around to exit from out of the room. Now, I wonder how much you've improved since our last meeting. Gear sat straight up. As he took another drink from his flask, his appearance began to slowly change, becoming more youthful until he resembled a strong middle-aged man. A spatial distortion formed in front of Gear, however, he was not on guard since he knew who was coming through. A few moments later, Terminus appeared from within the spatial distortion. There was a visible look of shock written all over the face of Terminus. You've regained your old strength. Ahahaha. You have quite the imagination, old friend. This is only temporary thanks to the effects of the Imperious Rejuvenation Liquid. I'll convert back to my original self when the dosage runs out. Gear shook the flask in his hands for a brief moment before returning it to his pocket. Imperious Rejuvenation Liquid. You've actually kept such a thing hidden away in mere endless flask this entire time. Imperious Rejuvenation Liquid was a legendary medicine that was capable of healing all wounds. Even those one step away from death, as long as they were still alive, could be completely healed by the Imperious Rejuvenation Liquid. However, Terminus had a worried expression on his face. The wound from that time is truly beyond mortal means. If even a legendary medicine like the Imperious Rejuvenation Liquid taken in large quantities cannot heal that wound, then I'm afraid only a divine being can do so. He let out a long sigh. Cheer up, my old friend. If I had to do it all over again, I would not hesitate. This small sacrifice is nothing worth mentioning. Gear smiled as he thought back to his previous days as an adventurer. A few moments later he stopped his reminiscing and got back to the matter at hand. I doubt this visit is a social one. Is the realm still closed? Gear asked. It still requires more power if we wish to open it ahead of time. However, in order to do so, we'd have to redirect power from the magic barrier surrounding Amaharp, which, as you know, is out of the question. A hint of frustration could be heard in the way that Terminus spoke. If we have to wait a bit longer, then so be it. It's important that the portal is stable, otherwise, even if they were to make it to the realm successfully, getting back would be nearly impossible. Gear said. Terminus nodded. On a side note, I assume you have already made your choice as for who you are sending. I was just informed a few moments ago that he had returned to Amaharp. He should be arriving here at the palace soon. Gear responded. This mission has to succeed. It's the only way to guarantee the survival of Amaharp and all of its citizens. It's only right that he knows exactly what he's getting himself into. Terminus had a grave facial expression. Of course, he has a right to know. After all, even though the rewards from that place are plentiful, the price of failure is not light by any means. Gear started walking towards the door. "Hm. Where are you heading off to?" Terminus asked as he saw Gear leaving the room. Gear halted his steps. "It's been a while since I've gone for a little walk. It's not often that I'm able to experience the strength of my prime. Besides, I'll be back before he arrives here." While Gear was speaking, his figure was constantly flickering. His actual body was already over 100 kilometers away from the palace. This was the true power of the flickering steps and the reason that enemies on the battlefield feared Gear's presence. Terminus shook his head. "He calls that a little walk." The space before Terminus distorted as his figure blurred and he took his leave. Meanwhile, at the auction house in Amaharp, it actually sold for such a price. Isroth was currently at Amaharp's auction house. He needed to see what price the 5 cycles pills sold for. If what she said is really true, then I'll have to make a trip to that place at some point in the future. Isroth was referring to the favor he asked of Ze before they parted ways. Chapter 85 The Calm Before the Storm Part 2 You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Before parting ways, Isroth inquired of Ze about her knowledge regarding fire cores. At the moment, Isroth had a mediocre at best fire core for his cauldron and needed a more powerful one that would enable him to create stronger pills. Ze sadly did not have any information about where he could find a fire core for his cauldron. However, she had told Isroth something that intrigued him. Although she did not have any knowledge about how to locate powerful fire cores, she managed to piece together a theory based on the bits of information she acquired during her visit to Amaharp's library. In her words, searching for a fire core is the equivalent of looking for a needle in a haystack. Except sometimes, the needle may not even be there, to begin with. Fire cores were dropped by strong fire-type monsters. However, not all fire-type monsters dropped fire cores. As for those who did, it was not a guarantee that the item would drop. The thing that caught Isroth's attention the most was the possible method she spoke of at obtaining a fire core with virtually a 100% chance. Of course, it was only her theory, but Isroth found it to be a sound and logical conclusion based on the facts provided. To sum up what she said, it was, the angrier monster, the better the chances. What she meant by that was based on what she understood, all fire-type monsters that possess a fire core share a similar trait. It was that they all were fueled by an unexplainable rage, even more so than usual for monsters. The longer a fire-type monster that possessed a fire core fought, the more intense their flames would become. The more intense their flames became, the more power they would draw from their fire cores. In theory, as long as a fire-type monster who possesses a fire core reaches the peak of its flame intensity, the more likely the system was to reward a player with the fire core as a drop item. Ze regretted that she did not have access to the palace library, or else she would have been able to provide a more solid theory. However, Isroth decided to test her theory when he had the time to. This system seems capable of a multitude of things. The chances of her theory being correct are quite high. Isroth opened his auction cube to check on the status on his 5 cycles pill. When he did, he at first believed that the number he saw was incorrect. Such a price. I did not think a single 5 cycles pill would do this well. A single 5 cycles pill had sold for 50 gold coin. He only spent a few silver coins to purchase enough ingredients to make 150 pills and had already earned back his expenses as well as made a large profit. But, Isroth did not fully understand the true reason as to why his pills sold for such a high price just yet. However, Isroth was satisfied with the generous amount he acquired. Even if he sold all 150 pills that he would eventually create for 1 gold coin each, they were enough to net Isroth a total of 150 gold coins. At the current RMB exchange rate of 1.990, that would make for a grand total of 148,500 renminbi. Of course, that was before the taxes were taken out. There were millions upon millions of players on RML. Even if the price would eventually fall off, the potential profit was still astronomical. If he could generate a steady income from this, then it would not only provide him and Rayleigh with all the expenses they would require, but it would also help for him to set in motion something he had been thinking about for quite some time now. For now, I will focus on crafting the remaining pills. Since the cauldron I was gifted can handle grade 3 pills, there should not any unexpected accidents this time around. I'll head over to the apothecary building. While Isroth could craft pills anywhere thanks to the cauldron he possessed, he did not want to do it in such a public place. He was not afraid of anyone stealing his pill recipe since that was virtually impossible. Isroth just wanted absolute concentration so that he could complete the pills as fast as possible, put them into the auction house for sale, and then finally return to leveling up. Isroth collected his coins from the system, not bothering to convert it into RMB. After all, he would still have a use for the coins itself to purchase items sold by NPCs. Isroth left from out of the auction house and was heading towards the apothecary building until he suddenly heard a thunderous voice directed at him. However, no one else seemed to be able to hear this voice except for him. "That, Sir Isroth. Your presence has been requested at the palace. Please report immediately as it is an urgent matter." Isroth furrowed his brows. His presence was requested at the palace. What could the palace possibly want with him? Could it be that they've figured out something about Vosrak and the world quest? A few seconds later, a Crimson Corps guard appeared in front of Isroth. It seemed as though he was the source of the voice and was able to transmit it in such a concentrated sound wave so that only Isroth was capable of receiving his message. A Crimson Corps guard. "Sir, I ask that you follow me to the palace." There were many players going back and forth, however, most of them stopped when they noticed that a Crimson Corps guard had approached a player. They all started to become excited. Could this be the start of a huge event? "Hey, that player is talking to a Crimson Corps guard. I tried once and didn't even get a glance spared in my direction." "Forget that. Did you hear what he just said? He called that player sir." A powerful Crimson Corps guard actually referred to him as sir. Who exactly is that player? What did he do to earn such respect from the Crimson Corps guards? He must be some super elite player from a top guild. That's the only explanation I can think of. The players were all coming to different conclusions about the situation, however, Isroth nor the Crimson Corps guard paid them any attention. "Oh. I've never been to the palace before. May I inquire as to why I'm needed?" Isroth responded in a carefree manner. He would not intentionally be rude to someone who has so far shown him such a good deal of respect. "Sir, I am afraid this matter is confidential. However, your questions will all be answered if you follow me. Of course, this is a choice, not a demand." The Crimson Corps guard remained extremely professional. He understood the dangerous journey that Isroth may eventually embark on. If that person thought of him as a worthy individual, then he deserved a proper level of respect. Isroth thought about it for a moment and decided that he could always craft the pills after he finished whatever he was needed for at the palace. "All right, lead the way." The Crimson Corps guard turned and began to walk towards the direction of the palace with Isroth following him. As he walked down the streets with the Crimson Corps guard, Isroth attracted the attention of many players. Some of them wanted to go up to him and ask how he made contact with the Crimson Corps Guard. However, when one of them came too close they were forced back by the Crimson Corps Guard. They were not physically touched, but rather a strong force knocked them back and a heavy pressure fell down upon their bodies. 1 out of 10,000. What a well-defined aura. Although players could not get too close, there were still a few that did not need to do so and were only there to observe. Those were the few that monitored any noticeable events that took place within Amaharp and relayed the information directly to their guild. Though, that was mostly only the top guilds who had the resources and manpower to do so. A lot of the top guilds were interested in the matter. However, it was not enough to draw their attention away from something else that was many times more important than a mere event. There was already a rank 3 apothecary within RML. What appeared in the auction was a grade 3 pill. In RML, there was no other way to receive pills except from other players or by making them yourself. NPCs did not sell pills and the pills created by them were regulated by the city they resided in. Of course, a grade 3 pill itself was not worth 50 gold coins at all. The hope was to purchase the pill in hopes of deciphering it, studying it, and retrieving the recipe for the pill. The guild who was fortunate enough to obtain the grade 3 5 cycles pill was, in fact, one of the top guilds, Sage Falls. Sage Falls was known for their aggressive and domineering behavior. All the members that were a part of Sage Falls were extremely arrogant and looked down on players that were from other guilds. The leader of Sage Falls, Slayer, was also the person who purchased Isrotha's nameless blade. At the moment, the guilds were trying to find out clues as to who this mysterious apothecary was. After all, there was a great possibility that he was not in a top guild and they could rope him in. How could a top guild willingly sell a grade 3 pill? It did not take long for Isroth and the Crimson Corps Guard to reach the palace. Normally anyone who entered into the palace would have to go through various checkpoints. However, since Isroth was personally being escorted by a Crimson Corps Guard, no one dared to block their path. This place is even more luxurious than the Combat Master class building. The palace was grand and majestic, giving one the impression that whoever could create such a structure was truly a gifted architect. But, Isroth only spared it a glance. He believed that it was only above average based on what he had observed so far within RML. After walking through the palace halls for a few moments, the Crimson Corps Guard stopped in front of a large and sturdy wooden door. Just as the Crimson Corps Guard was about to knock, the door slowly cracked open by itself. "I'll leave you to it. Good luck." The Crimson Corps Guard gave those few words before leaving away from that location. Isroth pushed open the large sturdy wooden door and stepped into the room. When he entered, he noticed a small flicker shot right past him. The first thing he saw when he looked into the room was a middle-aged man sitting on a couch within the room. That middle-aged man reminded Isroth of someone he had met back in Opal Town. When Isroth observed a bit closer, he realized that there was a striking resemblance between that middle-aged man and Gear. In fact, that middle-aged man just appeared to be a more youthful version of Gear. "I'm glad you've taken the time out of your day to come and visit this old man." "Ah, I guess old man would not be entirely accurate at the moment." Gear took out a flask from his pocket and took a sip from it. With those words and that action, Isroth could already guess the identity of the individual before him. "You seem to be in good spirits, Gear. However, requesting for me to journey here was a little on the unexpected side." Isroth kept a carefree expression on his face. "Ahahaha, good spirits. Good spirits indeed, young man. I haven't felt in such good spirits for quite a while now. It's an important matter, but let us catch up a bit first." Gear laughed wholeheartedly. It would be untruthful if he said he did not enjoy being in his prime and that it did not make him happy. After catching up for a few minutes, Gear turned the conversation in a more serious direction. "Young Ma." "No, Isroth. I have a personal request to make. I hope your answer is one that is satisfactory." Gir was serious and there was no signs of laughter or fooling around. Isroth narrowed his eyes when he heard Gir's words. He gave a slight nod. You have gifted me such a wonderful skill and weapon back when I did not have much. If you have a request to make, then it would be ungrateful of me to not, at the very least, hear you out. Chapter 86 The Calm Before the Storm Part 3 You are listening at novelfull.audio. In that case, I suppose I should start off by telling you a story. For a brief moment, a look of sadness flashed within Gir's eyes. The memories were far from pleasant and too much had been sacrificed. Gir gestured for Isroth to take a seat at the couch positioned opposite of him. Isroth sat down on the couch, sitting face to face with Gir. The sadness that surfaced for that small instant did not go unnoticed by Isroth. After a moment of silence, Gir finally began to speak. Many years ago, creatures known as the Shadahi were able to freely travel throughout our very own world. Isroth nodded. This was something he had already figured out during his journey to the Shadahi realm and by meeting with the seer Terrorestia. There is something you should understand. All monsters, without exception, are born with an innate talent. Some have much higher talent than others, but it's how the weak are separated from the strong. When a monster is born, their strength cannot exceed a certain level, no matter how hard they try. Gir explained. It seems as if monsters within RML are similar to the weaker ferocious beasts within the Seven Realms. Judging from what I know about the Shadahi, they would be comparable to the sentient beasts. Back in the Seven Realms, sentient beasts did not have a limit to the strength they could gain. In fact, they were similar to cultivators in that aspect. However, it was exceedingly difficult for a sentient beast to be born. Gir continued, however, for the Shadahi things were different. They were capable of learning, adapting, growing, and becoming increasingly deadly with every encounter they survive. The Shadahi are creatures with infinite growth potential. I should not have to further elaborate about how dangerous they are. Isroth had fought against the sealed Equilor and met with the sealed Sixirius while within the Shadahi realm. He had also seen thousands of Shadahi located just within that one area. The Shadahi realm was seemingly boundless, and so who knew how many more powerful creatures existed? All Shadahi are creatures which are birthed from the same life form. In other words, their very existence is linked to only one being. When Gir mentioned that being, his facial expression darkened. There was a hint of fury and rage, two emotions that Isroth had never seen Gir express before. Now there's something interesting. Isroth was referring to the fact that all Shadahi came from the same life form. Wouldn't that make the being who created them the equivalent to a god of Shadahi? A being that could create a seemingly endlessly amount of Shadahi that were all capable of growing stronger by natural means. How terrifying! Of course, Isroth was viewing it from the perspective of the world of RML. There were obvious limits to this world, and so he could only imagine the amount of blood that was spilled during the struggle with such a being. Gir managed to calm himself down. To Gir, it was very personal, which caused him to lose his usual calm demeanor. In the beginning, the Shadahi were not numerous by any means. We simply thought that they were a new breed of monsters, created by the natural order of the world to balance out good and evil. However, we were wrong. By the time we realized our mistake, it was already too late. The problem had grown into something that affected and threatened our entire way of life. After deploying hundreds of thousands of soldiers to deal with the situation, we realized just how dangerous these Shadahi were. They could learn as they battled our soldiers. Unknowingly, we had created an even stronger breed of monsters. By the time we reached the source, there were only 7 of us remaining. Myself, Terminus, Jiox, Wave, Felicia, Nova, and my beloved wife, Astalicia. When Gir mentioned the name of his wife, sorrow could not help but find its way to him. It was even more powerful than we imagined. The result. Gir lifted up the shirt he was wearing and revealed a deep wound that was dark purple in color and emitted a foul aura. The energy being released by that large and deep wound across Gyr's torso was even more powerful than the aura of Sixirius. He actually survived this entire time with such a wound. I could not feel even the slightest bit of aura from it. Isroth narrowed his eyes to examine the wound. One could see cracks formed all around the wound as if Gyr himself was breaking apart into different pieces. It was an extremely unpleasant and sinister sight to take in. What was even more shocking was that Gyr was wounded to such an extent. Isroth had felt the power of the flickering steps for himself. It was safe to say that the system gave him the watered-down version of the skill as was common in games. However, Gyr could most likely use the skill at its full potential. If that were the case, then the skill itself was most likely at the SS or even SSS rank. How terrifying would a creature who could keep up with Gyr at that speed and even wound him be? Gyr put down his shirt before letting out a long sigh. This wound has reduced me to a weakened state and I am forced to constantly drink medicine just to suppress its effects. However, such a small wound cannot come close to comparing what I lost during that fight. Although 7 of us fought against that being, only 6 of us managed to escape with our lives. My wife, Astalicia, had perished to reserve our lives. To reserve my life. Trading such a pure and magnificent life for my own insignificant life. Gyr shivered slightly as he clenched his fist. Gyr was angry at himself for being so weak. He was not strong enough to protect the most important person in his life. She sacrificed her own life, so full of promise, just to save him after he was wounded by that being. How could he ever forgive himself? Isroth remained silent, however, he inwardly sighed. He could see just how much Gyr loved his wife from the amount of frustration he displayed. Isroth was also able to see just how pained Gyr was at losing the love of his life. Love. An eternal feeling birthed by a fleeting moment. The only fleeting moment which lasts an eternity. Isroth was reminded of someone he too failed to protect back when he first stepped onto his path of cultivation, because of how weak he was. It was one of the few regrets in his life. After a few moments, Gyr collected himself and reorganized his thoughts. Ahahaha, all right, enough about the sad parts. He smiled, but any fool with eyes could see that Gyr was just suppressing the thoughts and the pain which accompanied them. Isroth knew that it was bad manners to linger on a topic of such sensitivity, and so he did not mention anything about it and simply listened. After all, sometimes a person was not necessarily searching for answers, but rather just wanted to speak freely. That bastard sure was tough. Gyr took in a breath of cold air. In the end, we barely succeeded in escaping with our lives. I don't remember much since I eventually fell unconscious due to the pain from the wound, but that's pretty much the gist of it. The being was able to survive, although in an incredibly weakened state. However, if it could recover its power, then it would all be over. After fighting against the 7 of us, there was no mistake that its power would grow beyond our means by the time we ourselves managed to recover from the fight. As we feared, we were correct in our assumption. The being was about to step into the divine realm and its power could be felt throughout the entire world. However, just before taking that step, the divine beings finally decided that they could no longer sit back and allow the being to reach the divine level. They broke their own rules and intervened, imprisoning the being and splitting the planes to create a realm just for the Shadahi. Isroth had personally seen the seal placed on the Shadahi realm, which was located underneath the temple next to the Lake of Tears. In order to cross over at the moment, one needed the boundary sealing sphere, an S.-ranked item. As for my request, I believe it will not only benefit me, but it will benefit you as well. Gyr saw the potential within Isroth from the moment they met back in Opal Town. My request is for you to journey into the chaotic dogma realm and reach the very end of it. Only by doing this can we guarantee to stop the impending disaster set out to happen against Amaharp and all of its citizens. Gyr explained. However, while it is true that the rewards in the chaotic dogma realm are plentiful, the cost of failure is not light. You must know what you are agreeing to. Gyr observed Isroth's facial expression, however, there was almost no noticeable change during the entire time. Those who travel to the chaotic dogma realm. If a person dies inside of that place, they will experience an existence wipe. The threat of an existence wipe alone was enough to make most individuals stray away from accepting the task. Existence wipe. Can you elaborate a bit on this existence wipe? Isroth was curious as to what Gear meant by that. It was a term he had never heard used before or seen anywhere within RML. Gear nodded. Naturally, it is only right that you know all the details. An existence wipe is just as its name sounds, you will cease to exist. Although you are immortal and blessed by the divine beings, you will return to nothingness instead of being reborn if you die while within the chaotic dogma realm. Isroth furrowed his brows. Isn't that the equivalent of a character wipe? Isroth understood that there was no possible way the system would do anything to threaten a player's actual life. Such a game would not be permitted to exist and would be shut down immediately. However, having to recreate a new character from scratch if you were to die inside of the chaotic dogma realm was extremely harsh punishment. Such a huge risk. Surely the rewards will match. Isroth was never worried for a moment about taking a risk. He knew that if he truly wanted to reach the top he would have to take on a countless amount of risks. Given Gear's character, he must have thought it was likely for him to succeed. Otherwise, he would not willingly send Isroth to his inevitable demise. Though, Isroth was curious about something else entirely. This appears to be an important task. Why is it that you or Terminus do not personally go? Isroth did not know their exact strengths, but fighting against a being that was one step away from the divine level meant that they were incredibly powerful. At least, much more powerful than he was at this current moment. Gear shook his head. If that were possible, we would do so. Unfortunately, the chaotic dogma realm has a powerful restriction placed upon it that will not allow anyone above a certain level of power to enter. Isroth nodded his head. It must have been a legendary or divine level restriction if even Terminus and Gear could not bypass it. Now that you know all the details of my request, I ask you Isroth, will you accept? Gear set his gaze upon Isroth and awaited his answer. Gear would not blame Isroth if he decided not to go through with his request. After all, an existence wipe was too much to demand of anyone. While he would be disappointed, he would understand Isroth's choice. Without hesitating, Isroth responded. I accept. Gear had a shocked expression on his face, but it was soon replaced by one of joy. He did not expect Isroth to accept without the slightest bit of hesitation. Ahaha. Of course, you never disappoint in your actions. Good, good. Immediately after Isroth accepted the request, he received an alert from the system. System alert. The quest Journey to the Chaotic Dogma Realm has been added to your quest logs.l.rg. Chapter 87 The Calm Before the Storm Part 4 You are listening at novelfull.audio. Quest Name. Journey to the Chaotic Dogma Realm Recommended Level. 25 Recommended Party Size. 6 Quest Rank. SS Quest Objective. A potential disaster is looming over the capital city Amaharp. In order for Amaharp to have a greater chance of surviving the impending disaster, you must travel through the portal and reach the end of the chaotic dogma realm, where a mystery awaits you. Time limit. 1 day, after the portal status is open, current portal status. Closed 0/1 Reach the end of the chaotic dogma realm. Reward, gain +2 levels. 1 Epic rank equipment. Gain +200 world fame. Gain +1 skill point. X1 True world treasure chest. Failure, existence wipe. Special note. This quest may be shared with up to 5 other players. Isroth took a brief moment to look over the quest information. He figured the quest would be challenging, however, he did not expect it to reach this level. It's an SS.ranked quest. The rewards from this alone are already quite generous. Though that just goes to show how difficult this journey will truly be. When Isroth saw the True World Treasure Chest listed as a reward, he was reminded of the item he received while within the Sea Palace graveyard. The underwater world treasure chest. He had neglected it since he could not open it within the Sea Palace graveyard. Also, he had further pushed it to the back of his mind when he met with that mysterious old man. That and the fact that there was no immediate danger or reason for him to open the chest. I suppose when I finish taking care of some things and before I enter inside of the portal, I will open the chest. After he decided on that matter, Isroth furrowed his brows due to some suspicions he held. This quest seems to be related to the current world quest I have, but while it was true that both quests had to do with the fate of Amaharp, the world quest The Beginning of Beginnings clearly defined that failure was the destruction of Amaharp itself. However, this quest did not have such an absolute failure listed. That meant even if Isroth succeeded in completing the world quest, Amaharp could still potentially be destroyed if he failed this quest. Though this caused yet another question to surface in Isroth's mind. Why are so many events being centered around Amaharp? What is within this city that is so important? Isroth shook his head inwardly. There was no reason for thinking about it right now. All he could do was continue pressing forward until he uncovered the answers he was searching for. He pushed that to the back of his head for the time being and focused his attention on the status of the portal listed on the quest. At the moment, the portal was currently listed as closed. He had a time limit of 1 day once the portal was opened. However, he had no idea how soon that would be. Do you have an estimate as to when the portal will be opened? Isroth asked. Gear brought his thumb and index finger to his chin as he appeared to be in deep thought about the question. After a few seconds, he responded to Isroth. The earliest will be 3 hours. The latest will be around a full day. The estimate is a little rough since we are opening the portal ahead of time. 3 hours to a full day worth of time. I'll have to make some proper preparations. Isroth did not know what would await him once he stepped into the chaotic dogma realm, and so he would take the necessary precautions. After all, he would definitely rather not have to start all over again. While he was confident in his ability to regain his current strength, he would have a more difficult time executing what he had already begun to set in motion. Isroth and Gear talked about a few small details for a couple of minutes. However, there was no specific information Gear could give Isroth on the chaotic dogma realm since it changed every time. Gear let out a burst of joyous laughter. I did not expect you to reach that high of a mastery level with your flickering steps in such a short period of time. It took me years to accomplish that, ahaha. Isroth only gave a slight smile in return to his compliment. He would not become complacent just because he mastered a single movement skill. However, it would be rude to repay kindness with discontent. Creating a technique from nothing is many times more challenging than learning one that already exists. I'm sure you would not be any slower in mastering such a skill if our roles were reversed. Isroth said. There was a definite truth behind his words. Some people spent decades creating, learning and mastering a single technique. However, those that came after them could be considered fortunate, as they only had to learn and train, not create. Gear nodded his head in approval. Your wisdom does not suit your age. There is an old saying that goes with age comes wisdom. However, it seems such a saying does not apply to you. Gear's impression of Isroth rose a great deal when he heard Isroth's reply. To have so much talent while not being complacent nor arrogant. When he spoke he was neither submissive nor aggressive, but rather words of wisdom often left his mouth which prompted others to listen. There was a certain balance to him and a high level of confidence that Isroth carried with him. Isroth maintained a carefree expression, but he did not know whether to laugh or cry in regards to Gear's comment. In truth, he was still fairly young for a true cultivator, only a couple thousands of years old. In fact, if his true cultivation age was compared to the age of mortals on Earth, he would be considered to be in his mid-20s. But, that did not change the fact that he had lived for thousands of years and accumulated a vast amount of wisdom during that period of time. So, of course, his wisdom would not match his current age in this realm. Alright, I've kept you long enough. Gear held out a single finger toward Isroth. Imprint. A magical symbol formed on his fingertips and shot towards Isroth. Isroth did not feel any malicious intentions from the magical symbol, and so he did not bother trying to avoid it. Also, it was simply too fast for him to avoid, even with his heightened senses. The magical symbol sunk into Isroth's forehead before soon disappearing. A small light flashed for a brief moment, becoming faint before eventually dying out. That magical symbol will alert you once the portal is successfully open. When that happens, you must immediately return to the palace. Don't worry, as long as my imprint is with you no guards will dare to block your path. Gear reassured Isroth. Isroth was just wondering if the system would automatically warn him when the portal was opened or not, however, it seemed as though his worries were unnecessary. You must have many preparations to make, Isroth. You should take the time to do so as being underprepared can lead to a disaster. We will meet again before your entrance into the portal. Gear said. Isroth stood up, then, I'll be taking my leave for now. Isroth had a few tasks to take care of before he ventured into the chaotic dogma realm. He began to head towards the door, but just as he was about to exit the room he heard Gear ask a question. Do you have any people you have in mind to accompany you? Gear knew that Isroth was strong, however, there was a time limit and one person could only do so much alone within that time. Also, the chaotic dogma realm was not a place to take chances. Isroth halted his steps and slightly turned his head around. On his face was his usual carefree smile. I have a few people in mind. With that, Isroth walked out of the door and headed in the direction of the palace exit. Around 15 minutes later, Beov Isroth had already arrived at the apothecary building and was currently inside one of the rooms located on the third floor. There were not many rooms located on the third floor due to the fact that there were not that many rank 3 apothecaries within Amaharp. Isroth removed his dark abyssal cauldron from his inventory and placed it before him. He then initiated the heating process for the dark abyssal cauldron and raised it to its peak temperature, pushing the fire core to the very limit of its capabilities. At the moment, Isroth had enough ingredients to successfully create a total of 155 cycles pills. He planned on putting the majority of the pills up for sale and keeping part of them for potential bargains. Either way, the cheap ingredients made it quite easy for Isroth to create as many 5 cycles pills as he wanted without having to worry about the production cost. The only troublesome ingredient to obtain at the moment would be the isolated water droplet. This was because Crosshaven was presently in control of the Sea Palace graveyard. Which meant that if Isroth wanted the isolated water droplet, he would have to constantly make trips to the Sea Palace graveyard, which was impractical. Or, he would have to acquire the item from Crosshaven directly. Isroth could not waste his time farming isolated water droplets. Besides, he was unsure if Crosshaven was even aware of the reagent located within the dungeon they were guarding. I am unsure of the way Crosshaven operates when it comes to such things, however, judging from my previous brief encounter with them, at the very least, they don't seem unreasonable. Isroth had already started crafting the 5 cycles pills. His speed was astounding during the process and all of his movements were precise. Not having to worry about pushing the cauldron too far, Isroth was able to rapidly produce batch after batch of 5 cycles pills, all of which were grade 3 in rank. It was a tedious process having to complete the same set of actions 50 times, but it did not bother or wear down Isroth since he was used to crafting higher-level pills that required more finesse and did not allow for the simplest of mistakes. After about 50 minutes, Isroth had finished creating all 50 batches of 5 cycles pills, which made for a grand total of 150 grade 3 pills. All the pills were set into his inventory. Isroth noticed that the dark abyssal cauldron did not leave a single bit of medicinal essence left over. It devoured everything remaining. Interesting, it becomes stronger by feeding off the medicinal essence left over from crafting pills. Isroth had an idea and tried tossing one of the 5 cycles pills he made into the dark abyssal cauldron to see if it would have a greater feeding effect. However, there was no reaction whatsoever. He placed the cauldron and the pill back into his inventory. It seems as if it can only feed off of the leftover essence and not directly from the pill itself. It was a bit disappointing, but the cauldron would naturally grow stronger as Isroth used it more frequently. Isroth then removed the underwater world treasure chest from his inventory. Now was a better time than any to see what was inside of it. There was a 20% chance to receive a common item, a 50% chance for an uncommon item, and a 30% chance to obtain a rare item. Isroth believed that the reason the rare chance was even higher than the common chance was due to the fact that the chest itself was a rare ranked item. However, a 30% chance for a rare item could already be considered a favorable probability. He opened the underwater world treasure chest and soon after, the item disappeared from his hands and was replaced by a gentle glowing light. A few moments later, an item appeared within Isroth's hands that had a faint aura surrounding it. He heard the sound of the system alert go off when the new item emerged from the underwater world treasure chest. System alert. You have received 1 Crystal Sea Head Ornament. Chapter 88 Making Preparations. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Name: Crystal Sea Head Ornament, Rare, Level 23. Type: Unknown. Requirements: None. HP, 700 DEF. 30 AGI. 100 Crystallization, Active. Encases yourself, an ally, or an enemy within a case of powerful magic crystal for 20 seconds. While within the crystal, the target is unable to perform any actions. If the target is an enemy, they can channel their mana or energy. By channeling their mana or energy, the enemy can reduce the amount of time spent crystallized. The crystal integrity will always start off at 100%. The encased target cannot take damage or heal while crystallized. The user of this skill can deactivate it at any time. Cooldown: 10 minutes. Special note: an old relic that still retains some of its power that was left behind after First Great Sea War. It once belonged to a famous merman of great status. The equipment gave great stats for a headpiece. In fact, the stats were even better than that of his level 15 rare torso piece, though that was to be expected. Usually, however, the torso piece would be the item that gave the most desirable defensive stats to the majority of players. Even though the defense stat itself is fairly low, the agility, HP, and active skill made up for it. Isroth was a little surprised by the 20 seconds listed on the skill. Rendering an opponent helpless for that amount of time could be devastating during a team fight. Even more so for an item that was only level 23. He could also use the item to save allies in a pinch. It must be due to the enemy being able to pour in mana or energy to reduce the amount of time spent within the crystal. I do not know how much effort one would require in order to break free. It is even more difficult making an estimate when it comes to boss monsters. There were still quite a few things Isroth had left to figure out about the crystallization skill attached to the Crystal Sea Head Ornament. However, he understood that he would naturally obtain that information after using it a few times. Isroth wasted no time and instantly equipped the Crystal Sea Head Ornament after he finished reading it over. With this, his overall combat power and arsenal had risen to another level. Name: Isroth EXP, 98, 561/120, 000 level. 22, stat points. 0, title. None class. Combat Master HP, hit points. 2, 500/2, 500 energy. 100 attack, ATK. 430 defense, def. 155 agility, AGI. 400 magic, mag. 0 physical resistance. 15% magical resistance. 15% luck. 1. I should head to the auction house to put the 5 cycles pills up for sale. However, since I'm already here and have some time, I should experiment a little. Before he started, Isroth examined the miscellaneous reagents sitting within his inventory. I should probably give them a heads up. Isroth opened up his friends list and sent out a message to 3 people on his friend list, but he kept the message a little vague. It would be much easier to tell them all at once in person rather than discussing it with them one at a time. The first to return his message was Luna. At the moment, she was out completing a quest. However, she said that she would return to Amahark within the next hour with plenty of time to spare. Of course, she had no problem tagging along. Isroth then saw the 4th name on the list. However, he was unsure if they would be able to journey with him to the Chaotic Dogma realm. That person was Halls, who said that they had to head to work shortly after Isroth logged off earlier. As a tank, Halls would be on the front line and therefore, he would be in the most dangerous position. It was an SS.-ranked quest with a recommended level of 25. If he left and only returned to RML a few hours ago, it was highly unlikely that he had even reached level 20 yet. If that were the case then, the risk of Halls facing an existence wiped was almost guaranteed. Isroth decided to still send Halls a message. He wanted to, at the very least, know what level he was able to reach. After all, there was still a chance that the portal itself would not open up for another 23 hours. After sending off his message, Isroth received a message in return near instantly. When Isroth read the contents of the message, he did not think it was right to call such a situation fortunate. However, it was fortunate for Halls. Or else there was no way he would be able to tag along. It turned out that just when Halls was getting ready to head to work, he received a call from his boss at the last minute informing him that they were closed for today. Apparently, the daughter of his boss had an emergency and they were unable to open up for business today. It was a locally owned place and so there was no one who could replace or cover for his boss. Therefore, Halls was only offline for a few minutes before logging back into RML. He was then, by chance, offered a party invite and had simply been leveling up since then. To Isroth's surprise, Halls had already reached level 22. Although he could still not be compared to Luna who had already reached level 23. Even though Isroth took on a dungeon by himself and had the assistance of the temporary passive skill equalizer, he was still offline for 30 to 40 hours in game time. Such a gap was not easy to close right away and it could already be considered as a frightening leveling speed after he caught up so fast. The other 2 people Isroth messaged was Guan Yu and Ze, who Isroth had just become acquainted with only hours ago. Before going their separate ways, the both of them sent Isroth a friend request which he, of course, accepted. Guan Yu did not hesitate to accept Isroth's vague request and did not ask for any additional details. Ze, however, was a bit more inquisitive. However, Isroth did not mind that kind of personality at all. It was good to gather as much information as possible before deciding on your next course of action. Isroth was being barraged with question after question. After not seeing an end in sight, he simply told Ze that she would be allowed access, at least temporary access, into the palace. With that, she may have a chance to inquire about access to their library. When he said those words, Ze immediately accepted without asking any further questions. Isroth let out a small sigh as he finally turned his attention back towards the reagents within his inventory. Now that everything is settled, it's time to experiment a bit. Isroth then started his various experiments with the miscellaneous reagents like the merfolk scale and yellow, razored Kryko shark fin that were within of his inventory. After spending slightly more than 1 hour experimenting with the various reagents, Isroth grasped a much better understanding of the way apothecaries functioned within RML. While some ingredients bore nearly the exact same traits as others he had encountered before back in the 7 realms, there were sometimes slight variations. However, correcting such variations only required him to run a few tests and mostly correct the distribution ratios. Although, he may be required to waste a few ingredients in the process. There were multiple tools available for players to use inside of the rooms located on the 3rd floor of the apothecary building. Grinding tools, a liquefying kit, and many other items were usable. Isroth had to admit, RML went all out when it came to the process of pill creation for apothecaries. However, it was still nowhere close to the level of apothecary reached within the 7 realms. He made a few interesting discoveries during his experiments, but he still required more resources so that he could solidify his basic understandings of the ways of an apothecary by RML standards. Isroth still around 1 hour left until the gates had a chance of opening. By now, everyone should already have returned to Amaharp, or be on their journey back. Isroth believed that it was best if everyone met ahead of time to discuss the specifics of the situation. Luna and Halls had yet to meet with Guan Yu and ZY and vice versa. It was not exactly ideal to have them wait until it was time to enter into the chaotic dogma realm to meet one another. After making sure he had everything with him, Isroth left the room on the 3rd floor and started walking towards the exit of the apothecary building. His next stop was the auction house to put up the 5 cycles pills for sale. It only took a few moments for Isroth to arrive at the auction house and set 135 of the pills up for auction. He chose this number because he planned on giving away 4 of the pills, in total, to the 4 who would be accompanying him on his journey into the chaotic dogma realm. He kept the remaining bit of pills as a bargaining chip. Just in case he came across an item that someone was reluctant to part with, or if he ever needed to obtain information from someone, he could use the 5 cycles pill to his advantage. Isroth had only one more major preparation to make, and that was obtaining potions. At the moment, he had only acquired the lower grade HP potions, which were slowly becoming useless. It would become even more apparent once he entered into the chaotic dogma realm. Therefore, he needed to acquire a higher grade HP potion. He checked the auction house, however, there was not nearly enough. In total, there were only around 5 medium grade HP potions. The large guilds must be sweeping the auction house clean. I suppose I'll have to use Plan B. Isroth still did not know much about that person, and so he was not sure if that person was worthy of his trust just yet. There was an alchemist Isroth had met when he arrived in Amaharp for the very first time. While that person was fair in his exchanges, there was still something off about him. Isroth was referring to Metronome, the player he sold the goblin's essence to. He checked his friends list and saw that Metronome was still online. He sent him a message about a potential business opportunity. However, before Isroth could further elaborate, Metronome said that he would rather speak face to face when discussing business. After thinking about it for a moment, Isroth saw no harm in agreeing to meet him face to face. Besides, there was still some time left before he had to meet up with the others. Around 15 minutes later, Isroth was sat down at a small INN. A familiar player sat across from him. That player was naturally Metronome. Hey. That's a little unreasonable. You're asking for the impossible. Metronome let out a long sigh. He did not think that Isroth would be so stubborn with his request. The words from your very own mouth just moments ago said that it was not impossible, just highly unlikely. The question is no longer whether or not you're capable of achieving the goal in time, but rather if you're willing to. Isroth said with a carefree expression on his face. Metronome could only give a helpless smile. All right, fine. I got it. I'll make it happen somehow. He wanted to build some kind of solid connection with Isroth, and so it would not be beneficial to his goal if he turned Isroth down now. I'm sure you're more than capable of handling the matter. Isroth stood up from his seat and removed 20 gold coins from his inventory. I'll give you the remaining 20 gold coins once the job is finished. Metronome placed the 20 gold coins into his own inventory before he stood up. I still can't say that it's 100% possible, but I'll nevertheless try. He then left in a hurry as he did not have much time to complete Isroth's ridiculous request. Isroth understood that his request was a bit harsh, however, this was his simple way of testing Metronome. Not long after Metronome left, Isroth received a system alert as he headed out of the INN. System alert. Player Luna has sent you a message, we're all at the meeting spot. Just waiting for you now. Please hurry, I don't think ZE can survive much longer. Isroth had already informed the others about who would be in the party once everyone agreed to meet. Therefore, they should have all already added one another. Although, Isroth was a bit confused as to what Luna meant by ZE would not survive much longer. Their meeting point was clearly located in a safe zone within Amaharp. I'll head over now. Isroth sped towards their agreed meeting point. Chapter 89 ZE's Effer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Within Amaharp, the top guilds and many of the larger guilds all received shocking news. Most of them did not dare believe it at first, however, after verifying the authenticity of the information several times, they all hurried into action. More of those grade 3 pills had appeared, but this time there was not just a single pill. There was a grand total of 135 pills. That amount may seem like a lot to the average player, however, to those top guilds it was still just a drop of water in the ocean. What? How is that possible? This is a grade 3 pill. There is no possible way that so many appeared at the same time. Somewhere within a dungeon located a bit further away than the Sea Palace graveyard from Amaharp, Slayer had received news of more grade 3 pills being put up for auction. TCH, 50 gold coins wasted. Now every other guild may have the chance to unlock its secrets. Although Slayer's guild Sage Falls had yet to uncover the process of creation for the 5 cycles pill, in his mind he had already claimed the pill as his own and planned on creating a monopoly. Slayer had already ordered an investigation into the creator of the pills to try and rope him into Sage Falls. Slayer felt that with the number of resources he could provide, there was no way the apothecary would refuse his offer. I have to maintain control. I can't miss this opportunity to profit. Slayer grit his teeth before ordering the person next to him to send a message. Tell them to spare no effort in obtaining as many pills as possible. We need to prevent other guilds from acquiring the pill. Meanwhile, at the current headquarters for the guild Crosshaven, we must obtain at least 13 pills. It will not be possible to acquire any more than that due to the other top guilds that will be aiming to get their hands on that pill. 13 is all we need for now. So make it so. Yuan calmly spoke to one of the members of his guild stationed at the auction house. Heh, just as we were about to head out, those guys go and send this interesting bit of information. Dragus was next to Yuan with a strong and hearty look about him. Indeed. Yet, we still do not have any information regarding the creator of the pill. Sage Falls managed to get away with the last one. However, Slayer must be regretting the 50 gold coins he spent. I know perfectly well what sort of plans he had in mind. Yuan said. Crosshaven and Sage Falls had never been on good terms before, even while playing some of the previous MMORPGs. There existed no grudges between the two, it was just that their guilds were not a very good match when it came to getting along. Slayer was overly aggressive, arrogant, manipulative, and would do whatever it took to win. Yuan, on the other hand, was calm, composed, insightful, open-minded, and had a natural air of authority to him, rather than arrogance. The differences between the two leaders alone were enough for their members to not get along. Double the available personnel and locate the apothecary behind the pill. I find that he or she may not be so simple. Yuan gave a slight smile. Similar conversations were going on for all the top guilds. Even some of the smaller guilds were trying to accumulate more information about the mysterious apothecary. The chances were almost negligible, but if they could get that apothecary to join them, then their status as a guild would soar. Isroth, however, was completely oblivious to the top guild's eagerness to find him. Isroth rushed towards the meeting point that was previously agreed upon. He arrived outside of a small building around 5 minutes later, as it was not located too far from the auction house. This building was not one that was frequented often by players. This is why they chose it as a meeting location. ZE was the one who informed Isroth and he agreed that it was a suitable idea. Isroth opened the door that led into the small building, but just as he did so, he heard a loud shout come from behind the door. "Idiots! You two have no shame. You dare to team up against me. Aren't you two men?" That's Ziyi's voice. Isroth stepped into the room and the first thing he saw was Guan Yu with his arm around Hall's shoulder in a brotherly manner, laughing up a storm. Ziyi's entire face was bright red and she looked incredibly agitated at the moment. She grit her teeth as she was tried hard to suppress the insanity that those two created when they got together. After all, she could barely handle Guan Yu when he was just by himself. Luna was off to the side with a helpless smile on her face. She tried her best to calm Ziyi down, but Guan Yu and Halls turned out to be too much of a handful for her. Isroth blinked a few times before staring blankly at everyone inside of the room. Everyone was so caught up in the moment that none of them noticed Isroth's entrance into the room. "Ahahaha! You hear that, my brother? We have no shame. Ahahaha!" Guan Yu gave a burst of joyous laughter. "Shame? Brother, what have we said or done to even think about bringing up shame? Ahahaha! We're true men. True men have no shame." Halls was laughing in the exact same manner as Guan Yu. In less than 1 hour, Guan Yu and Halls were already calling each other brother. How could two complete strangers who had never met before today get along like they've known each other for their entire lives? Isroth shook his head at the sight before him. Although he predicted that the two of them would get along, he did not expect for them to get along this well so soon. It seems he had underestimated Halls and Guan Yu. They haven't known one another for more than 1 hour and they're already like this. Isroth did not even need to ask what was wrong with Ziyi, as he now understood what Luna meant in the message she sent to him. "Fine, since we're so generous then we'll give you the chance to regain your lost honor. Big sis Luna will be the judge this time," Guan Yu said in an almost borderline taunting way. Ziyi grit her teeth. "Fine. Then how about this one?" Luna had backed away from the situation to not be dragged into it, however, she still ended up being pulled in regardless. She could only sigh and give a small nod as her response. If she left them to their own accord, then Ziyi may not last much longer. Ziyi cleared her throat and straightened herself up. Parallel lines have so much in common. It's a shame they'll never meet. When she finished speaking, the entire room became dead silent. There was not so much as a single chuckle or giggle. Ha! Ha! Luna tried to make herself laugh, but it was far from her specialty to fake such a thing. It came out as forced and awkward, so it was not believable at all. Guan Yu and Halls almost coughed up blood from how stale that joke was. The way she told that joke should be considered a lethal weapon. An S.-ranked skill. Hey, I actually feel kind of bad now. She's really trying hard and putting in a lot of effort, brother. Halls said with a tinge of regret in his voice. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have made that remark. Isn't this a form of torture? Guan Yu responded to Halls with a gloomy look on his face. Ziyi had an expression of shock written all over her face. However, it was soon replaced by a look of defeat. The truth was, Guan Yu and Halls were messing around, being unruly, and telling jokes. Ziyi called their jokes immature and unoriginal, which prompted their response. The two suggested that Ziyi simply could not understand the jokes and had no true sense of humor. In fact, they bet that she would be unable to tell a single joke that could make them laugh. Ziyi saw this as a challenge that was beneath her, but after seeing the smug looks on Guan Yu and Hall's faces, she could only accept. When Ziyi saw that no one reacted to her joke, her face turned red from embarrassment. She was sure that the joke she just told would, at the very least, warrant some type of reaction. Well, Luna laughed a bit but it was obviously forced. That was a pity laugh. How could Ziyi not be embarrassed? When Isroth closed the door behind him, he made it so that it would be loud enough to catch their attention. However, it was still just shy of being an actual door slam. After hearing that someone else had entered into this remote area, Luna, Halls, Guan Yu, and Ze all looked over to see who it was. You. How long have you been there? Ze had just shown a very unsightly side. The fewer people to know about it, the better. She had not seen Isroth walk into the building. I thought it was an amusing joke. Isroth said in a straightforward manner. Everyone in the room was shocked and they heard what Isroth said. He actually liked that kind of stale joke. Unique men have unique taste. Guan Yu muttered under his breath. Indeed. Halls agreed. Luna could not help but giggle at the way Isroth kept such a straightforward and carefree face while saying such a thing. That in itself was enough to make her laugh, albeit in a reserved manner. However, instead of making Ze feel better about the situation, it somehow made her feel even worse. If someone like Isroth believed that the joke was amusing, chances are that it was probably, no. Definitely a terrible joke. Everything settled down a few moments later when everyone saw how serious Isroth was. He was usually carefree, however, he had a serious expression on his face at this time. Isroth had to take such a stance to let them know the gravity of the quest. He himself was already prepared for the potential consequences, but it was important that everyone was ready. You were pretty vague over the system message. I'm sure we're all curious as to why that was so, correct? Ze had regained her composure and was now back to her normal self. She swept her gaze across the room. Luna, Guan Yu, and Halls nodded their heads. The message Isroth had sent them did not mention many details, only that it was an opportunity that they would regret missing. Luna and Halls should have a bit of a better understanding of the situation since they've been with me on another quest that is linked together with this one in some way. It involves Amaharp itself and what the future may bring. Isroth said. Does it have to do with the seal on the Shadahi realm? Luna guessed. Did that chained guy manage to break free or something? Halls asked curiously. Guan Yu was confused by their conversation. Shadahi realm. Chained guy. What were they talking about? Ze was also surprised and just as confused as Guan Yu. She had never read anything about this so-called Shadahi realm. But, little did she know that such delicate information was only accessible within the palace library, and so she could not be blamed. Isroth shook his head, I'll explain everything. Isroth then went on to explain everything Gear had spoken to him about. He also added the previous information from the quest that he, Luna and Halls completed together. Deciding not to hold anything back since he found Guan Yu, as well as Ze to be trustworthy, he even spoke of the world quest. Luna and Halls were not even surprised by these chain of events. They had been around Isroth long enough to have built up a resistance and immunity stat to the shocking events that surrounded him. However, Guan Yu and Ze were totally dumbfounded. This guy already had an SSS.ranked world quest, completed an S.ranked quest, and now also had an SS.ranked quest given to him. What was with that insane luck? Was that even possible? Chapter 90 Consequences and Rewards. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. This was a lot of information to take in all at once for Guan Yu and Ze. Although it was a bit easier for Luna and Halls, it still affected them a great deal. However, when Luna and Halls remembered the type of person Isroth was, they believed that he would not purposely lead them to their demise. Needless to say, they trusted him. There was one thing, without exception, that Luna, Halls, Guan Yu, and Ze were a bit uneasy about. It was the failure that Isroth had told them about called an existence wipe. To lose all the progress they've made up until now would be detrimental to them. Coins, weapons, equipment, items. There was a chance for them to lose it all in one go. However, everyone understood that because an existence wipe was listed as the failure result, the chaotic dogma realm must have some pretty amazing stuff inside of it. Not to mention the fact that they would receive an epic rank piece of equipment. Not rare, but epic. No one within all of RML had an epic piece of equipment yet. In the end, everyone here was confident in their own abilities. If they were not, then Isroth would have never bothered inviting them to join him in the first place. Ha, an existence wipe. So what? That only makes things more interesting. Guan Yu said as he became fired up and ready to go. Well said. Who cares about a little existence wipe? I've already made a promise to go where you go, even if it's within this chaotic dogma realm you speak of, I'll follow you until the end. Halls gave his response. While it would be unfortunate to lose everything we've gained up until now, it would be even more regrettable if we missed something that has the potential to shift all of RML into a different direction. I believe such a risk is acceptable. Luna spoke in an unrushed manner. The only one who had yet to say anything was ZE. Everyone looked over in her direction. At the moment, ZE looked as if she was in deep thought. For someone like her who always weighed out the acceptable level of risk, this was a bit much to decide on so suddenly. After all, she knew that Guan Yu was powerful and most likely Isroth as well due to his past achievements. However, she had no clue as to how strong Luna and Halls were. It was safe to say that they should be considered powerful players due to Isroth inviting them, but that was mere speculation. If there was one thing ZE did not like putting her faith in, it was speculation. The more ZE thought about things, the more difficult the choice became. One of her good yet bad traits was overthinking everything. Sometimes it was good to be that thorough, however, at times one had to just charge forward, even in darkness. Our fears will always outnumber our actual dangers. Creating fear and worry often gives a small thing a big shadow. Do not make such a mistake. Isroth spoke in a carefree manner. When he had seen how undecided ZE appeared to be, he decided to give her a slight nudge. Isrotha's words were enough to snap ZE out of it. She had to admit that he was correct. One of the most common mistakes when overthinking things is that you may often create fears that are never really there. She understood the rewards and consequences, now she simply had a choice to make. This may be the only way for ZE to have access to the palace library. Such a treasure trove of knowledge was something she was unwilling to pass by. Speculation. She decided to push that to the back of her head and trust in her intuition about those around her, something she would never normally do. This may be the only shot I get to enter into the palace library. Also, the rewards will not be small for our accomplishments. Therefore, I have no choice but to accept everything, including the risk and potential consequences. ZE finally stated her answer. Isroth nodded. He could still sense how tense everyone was about the whole situation, despite some of their words. However, he could also tell that none of them were lying when they said that they were willing to follow him into the chaotic dogma realm or accept the risk. The first thing Isroth did was share the SS.ranked quest with everyone present. He also decided to share the SSS.ranked world quest with Guan Yu and ZE. The two of them were shocked when Isroth shared the quest, but of course, they accepted it. That was an SSS.ranked quest. The rewards were unimaginable. If they were willing to come along with him into unknown territory and face the dangers he faced, then Isroth believed that the two of them were worthy of receiving his trust and the SSS.ranked quest. However, there was one thing that bothered Isroth. They had no magic damage dealers. If there are monsters within the chaotic dogma realm that have high physical resistance, then it'll be quite difficult to get past them without a magic caster. However, there's only one magic caster I've been in a party with so far and there were too many unknowns about her. Isroth was, of course, referring to Scarlet. Though even if he did have her on his friends list, which he did not, he believed it would not be a good idea to invite someone with unknown intentions on such a dangerous mission. I suppose we'll just have to make do. There was nothing he could do about it but hope that he happened to come across a powerful magic caster before the portal into the chaotic dogma realm opened. But, the chance of that happening was highly unrealistic. Isroth removed 4 5-cycles pills from his inventory. This is called a 5-cycles pill. He held one of the pills up clearly for them to see. This will help improve our chances of success. He then gave 1 pill to everyone present. The pills were light purple in color with a gentle aura around them. They gave off a strong and sweet medicinal scent that resembled candy or some type of sweet treat. It was very easy to mistake it for something that a confectioner would make. When Luna, Halls, Guan Yu, and Ze received a 5-cycles pill, they were all stunned. This was a grade 3 pill. But, how did Isroth manage to get his hands on something like this? Or rather, why would he willingly give away such a valuable pill? One had to know that only rank 3 apothecaries could create a pill like this. There should not be any rank 3 apothecary players within RML at this time. So how could they not be surprised? If they sold one of these pills they would be able to make a huge profit. But, would any of them be so foolish as to sell a grade 3 pill? After all, this was a gift from Isroth so that they would have an edge within the chaotic dogma realm. Not only that, but it was unclear when and if they would receive another grade 3 ranked pill in the near future, and so no one was willing to pass up this opportunity. This pill is amazing. Guan Yu and Halls said at the same exact time in sync. To melee fighters like them, especially for Halls who was always at the front of every attack, this kind of pill would allow for them to reach new heights. They were extremely grateful to Isroth for such a marvelous item. Luna and Ze had the same thoughts, however, they were more reserved and did not just blurt it out like Halls and Guan Yu did. What a wonderful pill! I did not think that I would be able to consume a grade 3 pill this early on. With this, the timing of my heals can become even more precise and exact than before. Luna took a moment to appreciate the beauty of the pill itself. Everyone thanked Isroth for his generosity and even wanted to pay him for the pill itself, however, he turned down their offers. He was doing this for his own benefit as well and so there was no need for any kind of payment. Also, a small gesture would go a long way. This would be a moment all of them would not soon forget. Ze finally started to see why Luna and Halls remained so calm after Isroth mentioned certain astonishing things. They must have already been used to it. It appeared that every time she blinked, Isroth would come out with a new way to surprise them. After a while, one had no choice but to build up a natural immunity or resistance to it. This pill was perfect for a ranger-type class like Ze that depended on a level high of accuracy and their ability to hear their surroundings. A 100% increase in her sight and hearing senses was like giving a pair of wings to a tiger. The 4 of them consumed the 5-cycles pill and immediately felt as if their entire surroundings became even clearer than before. It was almost like observing the world around them in a different fashion. So this is the strength of a grade 3 pill. That was the one thought going on through everyone's mind. They felt as if a wave of energy was constantly pulsing throughout their entire bodies and enhanced their overall sense of perception. We still have a bit of time until the portal has the prospect of opening. However, if it does not open immediately, then we cannot afford to wait around for it to do so. Isroth did not want to waste time waiting around when they would possibly have to wait another 20+ hours for the portal to open. Therefore, he felt that even if they traveled quite a bit of distance away from Amaharp, as long as they started heading back once the Isroth received the alert that it was open, then there should be no issues since the 24 hours time limit would not start until that moment. Since the chances of it opening immediately are pretty negligible, then may I make a suggestion? Ze said. There was something she wished to bring to Isroth's attention that should improve their overall odds of success. Isroth had no problem listening to suggestions and so he nodded his head to show his approval. This will be the first time we have all been in a party with one another and we are aiming to complete an SS.ranked quest. This would be challenging even for a party of veteran players that have been together for a long time. Ze explained. No one disagreed with Ze's statement. Even a normal S-ranked quest was difficult. So much so that Isroth, Luna, and Halls ended up fighting a rare boss during their last S-ranked quest. If not for Isroth unleashing that powerful skill at the very end and the help of the boundary sealing sphere, then it may not have ended so well for them. ZE then continued, I suggest that we take the opportunity to work on our teamwork. Even though we won't obtain a perfect level of teamwork in such a short period of time, at least we'll have a general idea of each other's abilities. That way, we can be prepared for the worst to come. Even if it means potentially losing a couple of hours in the process, I believe it would be a fair exchange. Of course, there will be nothing to lose if the portal does not open while we are outside of Amaharp. Since there is the chance that it will not be open for another possible 20+ hours. ZE gave her view and opinion on the matter. Isroth agreed with ZE's point of view and suggestion. It would be unreasonable for them to have perfect teamwork, however, it was still possible to at least find a certain balance and have a basic understanding of each other's current capabilities. Going through a dungeon a few times would not take up too much time and would enable them to keep leveling up in the meantime. Since you've suggested it, I assume you already have a dungeon in mind? Isroth asked. ZE shook her head, the closest dungeon to Amaharp within our level range is under the control of the Guild Crosshaven. While that would be the most ideal situation, we could always substitute that method for questing. Either that or we have to travel a bit further away to the next nearest dungeon.